Hello my friends, and welcome to this next video in the series where we shall be looking at loops in JavaScript. A loop is an event or series of events that happen over and over again, that is, repeatedly. For example, you can think of something that happens every day for you. Think of getting up in the morning, eating breakfast, going to school, and then coming back home to take a rest. And then the next day, you get up in the morning, you eat breakfast, you go to school, and then you get back home to take your rest. And the next day, you get up in the morning, you eat breakfast, you go to school, and then you get back home in the evening to rest. So this series of events are in a loop. And in JavaScript, and in fact programming in general, it is more or less the same thing. Each time that event or that series of events completes, it is known as one iteration. So if we get up in the morning, eat breakfast, go to school, and then get back home in the evening, it is just one iteration or one looping. And then the next day, when we get up in the morning, eat breakfast, go to school, and then get back home to rest in the evening, that is another iteration, and that is second iteration. And if the next day we still get up in the morning, eat breakfast, go to school, and then go back home to rest in the evening, that is the third iteration. Now, let's go back to VS Code and see how we can begin to write loops in JavaScript. There are different kinds of loops in JavaScript, but a loop that we're going to be talking about in this video is something known as the for loop. The syntax for loop is very simple. So we're going to say something like for, that is using the for keyword, and then parentheses, and then opening and closing curly braces like this. Within the parentheses, we're going to write out codes that will help the for loop to run. So we start by declaring a variable and assigning a value to it. So I'm going to say let I equals 0. And then I end it with a semicolon like this. At the beginning of the video, I talked about the importance of ending our code statements with semicolon. But now in recent JavaScript code, it is no longer necessary or compulsory. But then when writing a for loop, we have to use semicolon within the parentheses. So right here, I have declared a variable of I and assigned the value of 0 to it. The next thing is to write an expression that will evaluate to true. So any expression that will evaluate to true will help this for loop to run. So I can say something like 2 less than 4. Is 2 less than 4? It is true, right? And it's going to evaluate to true. So since it will evaluate to true, this for loop is going to run. I can say 3 less than 9. Is 3 not less than 9? It is true. So this is going to evaluate to true, and then the for loop will run. And in fact, I can give the direct value of true, the Boolean value of true. So is this not true? This is true. So it means that this for loop is going to run. And then I end it with the semicolon. So right now I have two things. I have this variable declaration and assignment. And right here, I'm having an expression that should evaluate to true. So as long as this expression evaluates to true, this for loop is going to run. And what is this for loop going to do? It is going to execute all of the codes that we have within the for block. That is, codes within the opening curly brace and the closing curly brace. So let me console.log all those things that we do on a daily basis. So I'm going to say console.log get up in the morning. Next, I'm going to say console.log eat breakfast. And then I'm going to console.log go to school. And then lastly, I'm going to console.log get home to rest. So as soon as I save this file and view our browser's console, we'll see that all this code will get logged onto the console over and over again without ever stopping. So let me save this file and view in our browser's console. But before I do that, let me open up the console on our browser. So I'm going to right click and inspect. By the way, I'm using an Epic browser at the moment, not a Safari browser. So I'm going to save this file right now. Now I've saved this file, and if you watch closely, you can see that these codes, they're going up, right? So you can see get home to rest, get up in the morning, eat breakfast. The code is repeating itself over and over again. Maybe this code must have run about 10,000 times or 20,000 times, I don't know, but it keeps on running. And if we're to leave this code like this, it's going to run forever. As long as my browser is on, as long as my computer is on, it's going to keep running this code. And this is what is known as an infinite loop. That means there is no stopping to it. So it's going to be running on and on and on. And I'm going to try to see if there is a way to view the number of times that this code has run. Okay, right here, you can see the number of times this code has run. Over 900 times, probably 1,000,000 times or something. But then you can see it just keeps running, and that's what these numbers are indicating. So there is no stopping, and it's going to continue from now to tomorrow to next tomorrow till the end of the year. It's not going to stop. But then it's not good for our system, right? So this is an infinite loop. It's going to run forever. Now to stop this, I'm just going to close this browser's window and open a new window. And now I'm back to a new browser's window. We saw previously that the code right here, all these console logs were in the console, and they were executing time and time again with nothing to stop it. And that means I was stuck in an infinite loop. And the reason for that is because this condition right here, this expression I should say, is always true, right? True is always true, and there is no way to change it to false. And that's why we got stuck in an infinite loop. So if you provide an expression right here that always executes to true, and there is no way to turn that expression to false in some way, then you'll be stuck in an infinite loop. So what I'm going to do is to actually delete this true right here, because true will always be true, right? So I can say something like I less than 10. So I want to execute this for loop as long as I is less than 10. So if you check it now, you can see that I is equals 0 and 0 is less than 10, which is true, right? So this expression is going to evaluate to true, and then we'll have all this code right here executed on the first iteration. So I also want to have a way to increase the value of I as we go around in that iteration. So I can say I plus plus, which is a shorthand for I equals I plus 1. But this way is a bit lengthy, right? So I can just say I plus plus, which just adds 1 to I. So how does this for loop work? First of all, I declare a variable right here that sets I to 0. And then the condition is that as long as I is less than 10, this for loop is going to execute. And then I want to increase I by 1. So on the first iteration, when I is 0, all these codes get executed. And then I increments to 1. So on the next iteration, or on the second iteration, I is now 1. And we check again, is 1 less than 10? It is true, right? And then I gets incremented to 2, and then this gets executed. On the next iteration, I is now 2, right? So it checks, is 2 less than 10? It is true. And since it's true, I gets incremented again to 3, and then this code executes. Now, I is 3. Is 3 less than 10? Yes, it is true. Because of that, I gets incremented, and then these codes get executed again. On the next iteration, I should have been 4, right? Is 4 less than 10? It is true. And I get incremented again to 5 this time, and then the code get executed. So it's going to do that until I becomes 10, right? So it now checks, is 10 less than 10? 10 is not less than 10. So at that point in the iteration, this expression is going to evaluate to false. And because it evaluates to false, I is no longer going to be incremented, and we stop the execution of the for loop. So that's how it runs. And mind you, when a loop is executing, it doesn't do any other thing other than the loop. So even if I have a code outside of this loop, let me say console.log finish. This finish right here will not be logged onto the console until the for loop has gone through all the iterations it will ever go through. Now, I'm going to come right to my browser's console so that we can view the result when I save this file. So let me go to the console, and then let me save our scripting.js file. Now, as soon as I save it, we say get up in the morning, eat breakfast, go to school, get home to rest. And then again, get up in the morning, eat breakfast, go to school, get home to rest. And it does that on and on and on until this condition evaluates to false. In which case, we now say finish right here, because it now exits the for loop and then continues the execution on line 11. So that's why we got finish right here. So you can see there is no other logging of finish on this console. We only got it right here as the last thing. So one other thing to remember is that we declared a variable of I right here, which we're also incrementing right here. And then we're running our code. We can also access that I within the for loop. So if, for example, we wanted to say something like console.log I, we could do that, right? So that means we have access to this I right inside of the for loop. So I'm going to save this. And as soon as I save, you see when I was 0, this code ran because it's logged I to the console and logged this one. So this right here from 0 to the get home to rest right here is the first iteration. Now I get incremented to 1, and then from 1 to this second get home to rest is the second iteration. From 2 to this point is the third iteration. From 3 to this point is the fourth iteration. On and on like that till get to 9 and get home to rest right here, which is the last iteration, and then it exits the loop and log finish to the console right here. So it's just important to note that we have access to this I inside of the for loop, but not outside of the for loop. So it now means that I is only available within the scope of this for loop, which is within the block of this for loop. And so that's what you can see as a block scope in JavaScript. If I were to console.log I outside of this for loop, we're going to say that we're going to get a reference error because this console.log statement right here is on the global scope, and then there is nowhere in the global scope where we have declared a variable of I and assigned it a value. We only did that within this for loop, so it doesn't have access to the I variable. And in fact, I'm going to take this one away and save this file, and you see that the loop ran, all right, but then we get this reference error, I is not defined. And that's because there is nowhere we find a definition or declaration of I as a variable. It only exists within the for block or the for loop. In explaining this for loop again, another point to note is that these statements within the for block was executed about 9 times. And that's because of the way I've written this code within the for parentheses. So if you look here, you see that I is less than 10. So I'm saying as long as I is less than 10, execute all the code right here. So that's why this code got executed up to 10 times. So it had about 10 iterations. So if I wanted to have about 5 iterations, I would have probably said as long as I is less than 5. So let me save this file. Of course, let me remove this and save. So as soon as I save, you can even see it right here that we get all those logged to the console about 5 times. Right now, I want to give you a code challenge. Of course, is the solve a code time. So I'm going to write a series of instructions for you to follow to practice this for loop with me. So then, the instruction is just to write a for loop that prints your name about 5 times. So try this challenge and see how far you can go. Of course, make sure that you try practicing this. Make sure that you try to log your name to the console about 5 times using the for loop. And then if you get stuck in the way, you can come back and click on play to see the solution to the code. Alright, now to write a loop that will print my name 5 times to the console, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear all of this, and then I'm going to begin by using the for loop keyword, which is for, and then parentheses, and then the curly braces. So within the parentheses, I'm going to declare a variable of I and assign it value of 0, and then semicolon, and then what is the condition upon which this for loop should run. So as long as I is less than 5, run this for loop. And then afterwards, I have to increment I, otherwise I get stuck in an infinite loop, just like we saw earlier on. So right here, within the for loop, I'm going to log my name to the console. So console.log Dominic. So as soon as I save, you see that Dominic gets logged onto the console, and you can see this 5 in front of Dominic. It shows that Dominic was logged about 5 times. So that, my friends, is the basics of loop and for loop in JavaScript. See you in the next video. Please, my friends, like my videos and subscribe to my channel. It will go a long way in helping me to create videos like this.